You might be thinking, my keyboard isn't that bad. And it might not be, it just might not be right for you and the things that you use it for. I have tried a lot of keyboards and have even built a few custom ones, so I have become pretty familiar on what makes a good keyboard. So make sure you watch until the end of the video, as I'm going to try my best to help you find your perfect keyboard so you never have to worry about your keyboard holding you back again. The first thing you're going to want to figure out is if you want to buy a pre-built keyboard or you want to go the custom keyboard route. Pre-built keyboards are simple, as you don't have to do anything, you just buy them and you can use them right away, and they are usually a lot cheaper than custom keyboards. Custom keyboards, on the other hand, are quite a bit more expensive and you do have to buy all the parts yourself. However, it is an experience and is quite fun to do, as you get to pick out each part of the keyboard to your liking. Also, I do have a video showing all the best websites to buy parts and accessories for your keyboards if you do decide to go the custom keyboard path. Next, you want to determine how much you're looking to spend. Do you want a budget keyboard, a mid-range, or a high-end keyboard? For keyboards, like most other things, you usually get what you pay for. I consider anything under $50 US to be a budget keyboard. They tend to be built out of a little cheaper materials, but you can still find good keyboards in this range, like the RK61 or Redragon K530. I consider anything between $50 and $100 a mid-range keyboard. You can find some hidden gems in this range, as they start to use better materials like PBT keycaps instead of ABS, and usually have a lot of good features. Some of my favorite in this range are the Epilmaker TH80 or the ACO 3061. And for high-end keyboards, I would say it is anything above $100, which some people might think is a bit low, but to me, anything over $100 is pretty expensive for a keyboard. But for you, a high-end keyboard might be much lower, or it could be much higher. This is where you get into that price range for custom keyboards or big brand names like the Ducky 1-3 Mini and GMMK Pro. Next, you want to determine which size of keyboard is best for what you're going to be using it for. There is a bunch of different keyboard sizes, ranging from 40% all the way to a full-size keyboard. However, I don't recommend going smaller than 60%, as to me you just lose too many keys with 40% keyboards. But it is always an option if you like small things, or are already used to having small things, if you know what I mean. Let's just go through some of the main keyboard sizes so you can determine which size would be the best for you and what you will be using it for. Let's just start with 60%. They don't have any arrow keys, a function row, or number pad. I would say it's good for gaming, as you can save some room on your desk so you can have more room to move your mouse. 65% is the same as 60%, but it has arrow keys and one extra row on the right side of the keyboard. This also saves room on your desk and is only slightly longer than 60%, but you get the arrow keys. 75% is the same as 65%, but you gain back the function row. And most come with a volume knob or other media keys, which is a nice feature to have. TKL again is basically the same as 75% keyboards with 2 extra rows on the right, and it's just not as condensed as a 75% keyboard. So it does take up a bit more room on the desk compared to 75%. And full size, like the name implies, has every key including a number pad. The downside to this is it does take up a lot of room on your desk, and I would kind of only recommend if you need the number pad or extra hotkeys for editing or something else. This really just comes all down to personal preference and what you're going to be using it for. For gaming, I would recommend a 65% or 75% keyboard, as to me that is the sweet spot for saving room on your desk and having all the keys that you need. If you're an editor or just need a lot of hotkeys, you might want a full-size keyboard. If you're just looking to save as much room as possible, you would want to go with a 60% keyboard, as it is the smallest I would go without compromising any keys that you would actually need. I wouldn't really recommend a TKL keyboard, as 75% is basically the same thing, but it's just my opinion. I do enjoy 75% keyboards more, but if you don't care about that extra room and you do use those extra 2 rows of keys, you might want to go with the TKL. Next, you want to think about what features you need to have in your keyboard. To me, having a hot swappable keyboard so you can swap out different switches really easily is a must, and I recommend you look for a hot swappable keyboard as well. You might also want a keyboard that is wireless, has PPT keycaps, can be used on Mac or Windows, has good RGB and backlit keycaps, or anything else like that. Probably the thing that affects your keyboard the most is what switches do you want in your keyboard. This is the hardest part because it affects the feel of your keyboard the most, but it is almost impossible, actually it kind of is impossible, to tell if you like them or not without testing them out yourself. Some ways you can find out the switches that you like are going to the stores and feeling different switches, testing out a friend's keyboard, buying a switch tester online, looking on online forums to see which switches most people enjoy, and you can also listen to sound tests online to find out if you like the sound of a switch, although it could sound slightly different on your keyboard compared to whoever is doing the sound test keyboard. The main types of switches you'll see are linear, tactile, and clicky. Linear is just a smooth and quiet press with no bump, mostly used for gaming. The most popular you'll find on pre-built keyboards are red and silver switches. Tactiles are quiet and, like the name implies, has a nice tactile feedback when the switch actuates. This bump is usually the difference between different tactile switches. Brown switches are probably the most popular switch you'll see here. Clicky is basically the same as tactile, but it does make a loud clicking sound when you press it. This is known as the worst switch type because it wakes up everybody in your house, it can be heard when gaming, and gets super annoying over time, so I really wouldn't recommend this to most people unless you know that you really like this type of switch. The most popular switches are Razer green switches, Kale whites, or blues, which most people hate. There is also a difference between normal and enthusiast switches. Normal switches are the switches that come in most pre-built keyboards when you buy them, like Cherry, Gateron, Kale, and Otemu. Enthusiast switches are the ones that you have to buy separately. I have only used tactile enthusiast switches because that's my favorite type, like the Boba U4T, Holy or Glorious Pandas, Zelios V2, and Durock T1s, and they are all excellent switches. You can watch a lot of videos online to find out which switches most people recommend and try to make your best judgment decision around that. But of course the best would be to try to test them out yourself, which I know is kind of hard to do. Sometimes if you live in a bigger city, they do have meetups where keyboard enthusiasts go and you can test out other people's keyboards there, so that's also another option to find out what switch you like. There are a lot of different switches that are better for different things. You want to decide if you need a quiet switch, a fast switch, or if you just want a switch that feels good for overall typing. Most people say that linear are better for gaming, like Cherry MX Speed Silver switches, because it has a faster actuation time, so you can press the switch a little faster. And tactile switches are generally known to be better for typing, as to me it's the best feeling switch to press, and it also is pretty quiet. Of course, you can also use tactile switches for gaming and linear switches for typing. Once you get your keyboard, you might want to make some modifications to make it a better fit for you. Most keyboard modifications can be done pretty easily and without much expense, like clipping your stabilizers, lubing your switches and or stabilizers, adding foam in between your case and PCB, or PCB and plate to make the keyboard sound and feel better, painting your case, or if you want to spend more money, getting a whole new case altogether to personalize the keyboard to you and make it feel a little bit more high-end. Or you can get new keycaps altogether, which can totally change the look of your keyboard as well as the feel of it. I do have a couple videos on getting keycaps for your keyboard, and for the other mods, there are tons of videos you can watch to figure out how to do those as well. They're all pretty simple and easy to do. The main mod I would recommend doing is lubing your switches and stabilizers, as it has the most effect on the feel of your keyboard, although it does take some time to do. You might also want some accessories to put some final touches on your keyboard. I really like the look of custom cables, although they 100% don't do anything to help with the keyboard. They are just purely aesthetic and they look super cool, although sometimes they do cost quite a bit of money, so that's kind of like the final thing I would get. Wrist rests, on the other hand, can help you a little bit if you get fatigued when typing, and are fairly inexpensive, or I have even seen some people make their own out of wood. Again, if you're looking for places to buy all of the parts or accessories for keyboards, click on the screen now to find all the best websites to buy all things keyboards.